One of the earliest characters I got on my account was Albedo, far before I really became interested in getting better at the game. As I got better at the game, the more Albedo's kit struck me as an oddity. Despite being a Geo character, one of his main contributions to the team was giving a good chunk of EM through one of his passives, a buff that, at the time, was entirely useless to his base kit since Crystallize didn't do damage and its effectiveness as a shield was practically zero relative to other options that were available at the time. People did make use of him for other things like buffing Hu Tao in the Vape team, but he was slowly phased out, especially once Chiori released. However, now with the addition of Lunar Crystallize to the game, there now exists a way for him to personally make use of his entire kit. Quick note here, I know what the title says, but the ICDs and Albedo make things somewhat awkward with using Lunar Crystallize, but we'll make it work. It is a shame that there aren't many ways to have the reaction active. Currently, only two characters exist that allow for the reaction to be activated at all, being Zibai and Columbina. To really make Albedo shine, I opted to use the latter, though it's not like I really had a choice to begin with, given that I don't own Zibai. Another issue to tackle was the inclusion of a Hexerei character. Most of them don't really make much sense to use as a default. Lee and Durin apply too much Pyro, Razor and Fischl take away opportunities for Lunar Crystallize to occur by making Lunar Charge to happen instead, and I don't own Varka. The only two that made some kind of sense are Venti and Mona. I ultimately chose to use Mona. Additional Hydro application would be really nice given that Columbina herself doesn't apply that much, and Venti would honestly be swirling off more Hydro than he would be applying. There's one more thing I wanted activated, Ascendant Gleam. This is so that defense stats could also contribute to the amount of damage Lunar Crystallize would deal, something Albedo would have in spades. To do this, I needed another non-Cry unit that could also synergize with my current team setup, with the most sensible option being another Geo character so that I could have Geo Resonance active. Really, there were only two options, Zibai and Aluga. And, well, we already know that I don't own Zibai. Ultimately, my team ends up being Albedo, Mona, Columbina, and Aluga. This team has the most external synergies active out of anything I've made before. Hydro and Geo Resonance, Hexerei bonuses, and Ascendant Gleam. I was planning to on-field Mona for the most part, given that I would need to in order to extend her buff duration using her normal and charge attacks. For builds, I have Albedo on 4-piece Husk and Uraku as his weapon. For Mona, I have her on 4-piece Emblem and Fav Codex. I originally had her on Reliquary, but she didn't contribute nearly as much damage to Lunar Crystallize as I would have expected, which you'll see in a bit. There were also some energy problems, which Fav Codex fixed pretty nicely. Columbina has 4-piece Abeid and Prototype Amber. Finally, Aluga has 4-piece Silken Moon and Katane Crossspear. With the rotation, I'm doing something a bit loose. Albedo hold E into Columbina EQ, into Mona EQ, and to C. Aluga QE, Albedo hold EQ, Mona N2C again, Albedo E, Mona N2C, and then I repeat the rotation from Columbina. That's what I would do ideally, but I did run into some issues during my runs with certain enemies being really aggressive and lunging towards me, so do keep that in mind. Another thing is, you might be wondering, is why even do the Albedo holdy? Isn't Tappy okay? Generally speaking, it's okay, but against certain bosses that break Albedo's Solar Isotama, the problem is that if that breaks, his burst doesn't get the additional Geo hits, which also is additional Geo application, which you kind of need for Lunar Crystallize to do more damage. And so it's ideal that his main flower doesn't break. I know he has the silver isotomas, but like they actually don't allow his burst to do the additional Geo damage, which most people would ignore. But here in this case, because Lunar Crystallize is actually a decent chunk of the damage, I kind of want more application. Also, as you can see here, I did our full rotation test. This is with everyone actually equipped with their legitimate gear. And, you know, the team does decently. I mean, it's like Albedo's doing majority damage, which I want, and it's doing upwards of 60k DPS over a long rotation test. So, yeah, it's pretty good. I say it's pretty good, but, you know, 60k is below most people's standards these days, apparently, so... You know, I'm still living in pre-Fontaine era, so this is actually pretty good to me. Anyways, with that, we're ready to take on this Abyss. So starting off with Chamber 1, we have the Hera. It's really important that I don't do a ton of Geo damage here, because if I do, then the Hera will absorb Geo and then make all my damage completely moot. So I'm trying to do my rotation here such that it doesn't go into a Geo enhanced state, and as you can see, it doesn't. And not only that, it doesn't go into a Hydro enhanced state at all either, which is good because now it means all my damage goes through properly. And you can see here, I'm just going through my motions. I'm actually doing everything properly. Another thing you can see here is that when I'm Albedo Holdy, I'm trying to do it away from the Hera so that it doesn't break accidentally. It's just a habit I've gone into because I've gotten too many Geo constructs broken when playing Geo MC on Albedo in the past that I just cannot be bothered to deal with it. So yeah. We are shredding the Hera. It's not terribly surprising considering this Abyss's Blessing with Lunar Crystallize buffs on the second half, but you know, hey, it does pretty well. And that's it for the first chamber. Chamber 2, these Wild Hunters are so annoying. I'm not gonna lie. The biggest problem with them is that I took a lot of damage. Some of their lunge effects are really far. Like that lunge, him able to go that far is really destructive. They also do a lot of damage, and the problem is I don't have much healing in this comp aside from Prototype Amber. So yeah, it kind of hurts, and the damage does stack up quite a bit. Unfortunately, this is pretty poor dodging display for me. I really don't like these enemies in general. Not only they're just the design of them with their HP shield mechanics is just not fun. But, you know, we have Ascendant Gleam, so we're able to take them out in a reasonable amount of time. I say reasonable, but it still takes a while if you don't play properly. Now we're on second wave. I'm still just trying to go through the motions of my rotation that I planned out, but also doing it without trying to get hit by everything on the literal sun. I'm sorry, this is a really poor dodging display because it is, the amount of damage I'm taking is just simply crazy. A large part of it is due to Mona's animations being clunky, but that's just an excuse at that point. I already know that her animations are clunky. I shouldn't be taking this damage. One thing you might have noticed is that when you do her N2C, if you do her charge attack, you can actually just straight up swap to another character without having to do the jump cancel, which is pretty nice. Alright, third chamber. Characters are on a little bit of life support, but you know, you gotta make it work. I will say, Lunar Crystallize with 2 Geo units kind of shreds the Geo Shield quite quickly. So yeah, Geo Shield is about to go down. Goes down here. So now we can just do normal rotation stuff. Nothing too complicated, nothing too flashy, just good setup. There's one good thing about how this rotation works with how many times you place Albedo's flower, and that's if the boss happens, or enemy in general happens to be really mobile, you can adjust the solar isotoma location and just, you know, get your damage back up, which is pretty good. That's probably like the biggest thing during this fight because the statue moves quite a bit. And well, time to end it with a bang. Nice. As you can see, overall the comp does well enough into this Abyss, which is not terribly surprising considering that the current one shills it so hard. I did have fun using Albedo. It's been a while since I've had a legitimate reason to use him. I do wish that HOYO could eventually add an extra general Geo Infuser. There really isn't much of a reason to have Albedo on field outside of doing plunge shenanigans with his elevator. I think his buffs overall are nice, but there's some core issues that it doesn't fix. Like for example, his burst still doesn't really work unless you actually have his original flower up. The other isotomas, the silver isotomas that spawn, don't actually allow for the extra geo damage to happen, which I guess leaves some kind of skill variance for you to optimize, but that's about it. I do wish they changed Albedo's kit from the ground up, to be honest. I know I said before in a previous video that I don't like it when they do that. However, in this particular case, I think they should have, because Albedo is too similar to Chiori in a lot of ways I know they have their particular niches now where one is, you know, good in Hexerei context and outside of Hexerei context the other is better, but I think the fact that they basically have the same role effectively where you're just a Geo sub DPS that does damage off field and not much else is bad. I think they should have changed this kit to be vastly different from Chiori's, or at least more different than it already is, because right now I look at them and it's like, yeah, they're kind of the same thing, except one synergizes with Hexerei and the other doesn't. So yeah, that said, thank you for watching and see you next time.